My wife blocked me during her solo vacation, and 10 minutes later, our credit card told me she was not alone. That was the first thing I saw at 12:17 a.m., sitting at my kitchen table in Columbus, Ohio, with a half-cold cup of coffee in front of me, and the whole house, so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. The message on my phone said, "Not delivered." I stared at those two words longer than a grown man should. I tried calling Natalie once. Straight to voicemail. I tried again, slower this time, like maybe my thumb had made a mistake. Same thing. Then I opened Instagram and saw the clean little sentence that makes your stomach drop before your mind catches up. User not found. Facebook, blocked. Location sharing, unavailable. Even the shared vacation photo album we used for family trips had been closed to me. My name is Mark Reynolds. I am 42 years old, a structural engineer, the kind of man who measures twice, checks load-bearing walls, fixes loose cabinet doors on Sunday afternoons, and believes problems usually have a logical answer if you stay calm long enough to find it. But there was nothing logical about my wife disappearing from my life at midnight while she was supposedly on a solo trip to Miami to clear her head. She had said she needed space. I gave it to her. She said she needed sunshine, ocean air, a few days without being anyone's wife, anyone's employee, anyone's anything. I told her I understood. I drove her to the airport myself, carried her suitcase to the curb, kissed her cheek, and watched her walk through those sliding doors with a white linen bag over her shoulder and sunglasses perched on her head like she was already somewhere warmer. She smiled before she left, but it was not the kind of smile that stays with you. It was the kind that shuts a door. For the first day, she texted enough to keep me from worrying. A picture of palm trees. A blurry shot of the hotel lobby. One message that said, "Finally breathing." I answered, "I'm glad. Get some rest." She sent back a heart. Not red. Yellow. I remember noticing that and hating myself for noticing. By the second night, the messages got shorter. Then they stopped. At first, I told myself she was sleeping. Then I told myself her phone died. Men like me do that. We build reasonable bridges over unreasonable holes because falling through them would mean admitting the ground was never solid. Then the credit card alert came through. $684.13 at a seafood restaurant on Ocean Drive. I did not react right away. I just read the number. Then the name of the restaurant. Then the time. Then the small note under the charge from the reservation system because our joint card liked to save merchant details. Dinner service. Party of two. My fingers went numb around the phone. Party of two. Not room service. Not a mistake at some airport counter. Not a spa charge she could explain away with some story about self-care and cucumber water. A table for two. Charged to the card I paid every month, while my wife had me blocked from every possible way of reaching her. I stood up slowly because the chair suddenly felt too small for my body. The kitchen light hummed above me. The refrigerator kicked on. Outside, a late truck rolled down our street, tires whispering over the pavement. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary house. Ordinary night. But something inside it had split open. I did not throw the phone. I did not punch a wall. I did not call her sister or wake the neighbors or do any of the things angry men do when pain outruns pride. I set the phone flat on the table, screen up, and watched that charge glow like evidence. Then I said her name once into the empty kitchen, not loud, not soft, just enough to hear how different it sounded now. Natalie. The woman who said she needed a break from noise had made sure the only person she could not hear was her husband. And that was when I understood the first rule of being betrayed. The moment you want to chase is the moment you need to sit still. I sat back in the chair, letting the dim kitchen light wash over the counter, and tried to remember the last time Natalie had seemed genuinely happy with our ordinary life. She had always enjoyed the little things, the Saturday mornings with coffee and pancakes, the quiet Sundays watching television, the small jokes we shared over spilled cereal or a crooked picture frame. It had been subtle, a change that crept in over months, hardly noticeable at first. She started leaving early for work without saying goodbye, mentioning errands that did not exist, spending evenings at yoga or happy hour alone, coming home later than usual, a smile that did not reach her eyes. I remember the first time I noticed it, her glancing at her phone while we were talking, a flicker of amusement or interest at something I could not see, and I laughed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, that everyone needed personal time. But when the patterns repeated, the flights, the mysterious coffee shop receipts, The brunch reservations for two that she claimed were for friends, the small disconnects between what she said and what I could verify. It began to feel like the foundation of our life was shifting beneath my feet. I started paying more attention, not because I wanted to spy, but because instinct told me to observe, to record, to understand what had changed so quietly that even our daughter would have missed it. I looked back at the photos on the wall, framed memories of birthdays, vacations, and family gatherings, and felt a cold realization that the person who had once been my partner, my confidant, the one who would smile at my jokes and hold my hand during thunderstorms, was now a stranger walking alongside me in the same house. My mind did not race or jump to conclusions. I collected the facts, one at a time, letting the evidence accumulate naturally. Each text message she did not respond to, each call unanswered, each change in her routine was logged, timestamped, and mentally filed. I did not confront her yet, because confrontation without clarity would have been chaos, and chaos was not what I wanted. I wanted precision, certainty, understanding before any action. Sitting in the quiet house, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional passing car, I began to map out the timeline, cross-referencing dates, messages, and receipts, noticing the discrepancies in patterns and behaviors. The house was silent, yet my mind was active, reconstructing her movements, her choices, the path she had carved out of our shared life. I felt the familiar weight of responsibility, the engineer's instinct to structure, measure, and calculate, applied now not to beams or blueprints, but to the fragile architecture of trust. I reviewed the emails, the booking confirmations, the notifications that arrived to both of our accounts, comparing them to what she had said about her day, her meetings, her trips. Each small mismatch added to the picture, a puzzle forming from fragments that had once seemed irrelevant. I was meticulous, patient, calculating, not because I wanted to punish, but because the truth deserved to be understood before any judgment was made. The more I gathered, the more I realized how carefully she had managed her narrative, controlling information, controlling access, controlling perception. And yet, each move she made inadvertently left a trail, a breadcrumb path that led straight to the reality she had tried to conceal. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, looking at the spreadsheet I had begun to compile, tracking hotel reservations, dining charges, and timestamps. It was a quiet revenge in its infancy, the kind that required restraint, patience, and clarity. I sipped the now-cold coffee, tasting the bitterness, feeling the awareness grow. Every small detail mattered, every inconsistency a clue, and every day of silence was a step closer to understanding the full scope of her actions. The night stretched on, empty except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the glow of the computer screen, and I realized that patience, observation, and evidence would be the most powerful tools I had. Not anger, not confrontation, not accusations. I did not need to chase. I did not need to demand. I simply needed to know. And knowing, in its purest form, would eventually create the unimaginable outcome that would unfold naturally from the truth. The first thing I found was not a message. It was a pattern. 3 months before Miami, Natalie had started treating our marriage like a room she was already halfway out of. She bought new luggage and said it was for work trips. She changed her hairstyle and said she was just bored. She started going to a boutique gym across town, even though there was one less than 2 miles from our house. None of that would have meant anything by itself. People grow. People change. A husband who turns every haircut into an accusation is not a husband. He is a guard dog. I did not want to be that. So I let the small things pass until they stopped being small. The gym charges showed up every Tuesday and Thursday evening, but her mileage never matched the drive. Our SUV had a shared maintenance app because I liked keeping track of oil changes and tire pressure, and one night I noticed the odometer had jumped 38 miles more than it should have. When I asked how her workout was, she kissed the top of my head like I was a child and said, "Exhausting." That word stayed with me. Exhausting. Not because it sounded false, but because it sounded rehearsed. A week later, she came home with a new perfume, something warm and expensive, the kind of scent that arrives in a black box with gold lettering. I told her it smelled nice. She said a woman at the mall recommended it. Then her phone lit up on the kitchen island with a notification from a name I had not heard in years. Tyler Brooks. I did not touch it. I just saw the name before she flipped the screen face down, so quickly her wedding ring clicked against the marble. Tyler had worked with Natalie at her old marketing firm downtown. The kind of man who shook your hand too firmly and looked over your shoulder while doing it, always searching the room for someone more useful. I remembered him from a company Christmas party 6 years earlier. White teeth, navy blazer, divorced, loud laugh, too comfortable standing close to other men's wives. Back then, he had called Natalie brilliant 3 times in 10 minutes and told me I was lucky. I had smiled because that is what polite men do in crowded rooms. Now his name sat in my memory like a nail under a tire. After that, I noticed more. Natalie began keeping her phone in her purse instead of on the counter. She started taking calls in the garage. She laughed differently, not louder, but younger, like she was performing a version of herself I had not been invited to meet. When I asked about Tyler one evening, she did not get angry right away. That was what bothered me. She paused first. Just half a second. Long enough for the truth to choose a costume. Then she said he was helping with a campaign referral, nothing serious, and I was making it weird. I apologized because men like me apologize when the air gets tense, even when we are not sure what we did wrong. But that night, while she slept, I stood in the hallway looking at our wedding photo. Natalie in white, me in a gray suit, both of us smiling like the future had signed a contract. I wondered when love had become a place where asking a simple question made me the problem. By the time she announced the Miami trip, the script was already written. She said she needed 4 days alone. No coworkers, no friends, no pressure, just ocean air and quiet. She said it while folding clothes on our bed, placing swimsuits and sundresses into that new suitcase with the careful patience of someone packing for more than rest. I sat on the edge of the mattress and asked why Miami, of all places. She shrugged and said direct flights were cheap from Columbus. That was not true. I had checked earlier that week for a business conference in Tampa, and every flight south was expensive. Still, I nodded. I told myself trust had to mean something, even when it hurt. The morning I drove her to John Glenn Columbus International Airport, she wore large sunglasses even though the sky was gray. She hugged me with one arm because the other held her phone. At the curb, she said, "Please do not make this harder than it needs to be." I remember the automatic doors opening behind her, the smell of exhaust, the rolling suitcase clicking over the concrete. I wanted to say, "I am your husband, not your obstacle." Instead, I said, "Have a safe flight." She smiled, kissed my cheek, and walked away. I watched until the crowd swallowed her. Then I drove home through light rain, not knowing that the woman I had just dropped off had already decided which parts of her life I was allowed to see. By the time I got home from the airport, the house felt too neat, like Natalie had erased herself on purpose. Her coffee mug was washed and placed upside down in the rack. Her side of the bathroom counter was bare except for a silver hair clip she must have forgotten beside the sink. The laundry basket was empty. Even the bedroom smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, as if she had wanted to leave no trace behind. I stood in the doorway for a while, keys still in my hand, listening to the silence settle around me. Most men would have used that silence to relax. I used it to think. The first day passed without anything dramatic. She texted after landing and sent a picture of palm trees against a bright blue sky. I replied that it looked beautiful. She sent a second photo of the hotel lobby, all white marble and gold lights, the kind of place where people speak softly because the room itself already sounds expensive. Then came a picture of a mojito beside a pool towel, no face, no hand, just a careful little postcard from a life I was not in. I told myself that was normal. A solo vacation meant solo photos. But something about the angles bothered me. They were too clean, too cropped, the way people photograph a table when they are hiding who sits across from them. That evening, I reheated leftover chili, watched half of a baseball game, and kept my phone near my plate like it was a hospital monitor. Her messages slowed after 9. At 10:30, she wrote, "Going to sleep early. Long travel day." I looked at the timestamp, then at the restaurant charge that appeared 46 minutes later from a rooftop bar less than a mile from her hotel. $128. 2 entrees. 2 drinks. I did not text her. I did not ask how she could be asleep and ordering dinner at the same time. I just took a screenshot and saved it. The second day was when the story started showing its seams. Natalie said she had spent the morning walking on the beach, but our credit card showed a rideshare charge to a marina on Biscayne Bay. She said she was reading by the pool, but a lunch receipt came through from a Cuban restaurant in Little Havana. Again, party of two. Again, I saved it. My hands were steady each time, and that scared me more than shaking would have. There is a kind of calm that does not mean peace. It means the heart has stopped asking for permission to protect itself. Around 6 that evening, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and created a folder on the desktop. I named it Miami. Inside, I made subfolders for flights, hotel, meals, transportation, and messages. It felt strange at first, organizing the possible collapse of my marriage with the same discipline I used for engineering projects. But structure was the only thing keeping me from drowning in questions. Every file had a name with the date and time. Every screenshot went into place. Every detail became part of a timeline. At 8:15, I found the hotel confirmation buried in our shared email archive. Natalie must have forgotten that years ago, when we booked vacations together, she had set travel receipts to forward to both of us. The original reservation was for one adult in a standard king room, but the updated confirmation told a different story. Ocean View Suite. 2 guests. Late checkout. My chest tightened so hard I had to push back from the table. 2 guests. Not a glitch. Not a harmless misunderstanding. A hotel does not accidentally upgrade loneliness into company. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I printed the confirmation and placed it in a manila folder from my office drawer. The paper slid in with a soft scrape, and that sound felt final in a way I was not ready for. That was when Brian Keller called. Brian and I had known each other since college, the kind of friend who could hear one word in your voice and know the rest of the sentence. He asked how I was doing with Natalie gone. I said, I think she is not alone. He went quiet. Not shocked quiet. Experienced quiet. Brian had survived a brutal divorce 4 years earlier, and his silence had weight. After a moment, he said, Do not chase her, Mark. Do not call hotels. Do not threaten anybody. Do not give her a story where you look unstable. Build the case. I looked at the folder on the table, the printer still warm beside me, the kitchen light reflecting off the dark window like a second room watching mine. For the first time all night, I breathed fully. Build the case. 3 words. Plain, cold, useful. I wrote them on a yellow sticky note and pressed it to the front of the folder. Then I turned my phone face down, opened a blank document, and began typing the timeline from the moment I dropped her at the airport. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of black coffee, the steam curling slowly toward the ceiling, and opened the folder I had begun the night before. Each document, each screenshot, each receipt I had collected now felt like a thread in a web I was quietly weaving. The hotel confirmation from the previous evening was on top, with the dates and names highlighted. The name Tyler Brooks appeared again and again, each time subtly, but unmistakably indicating that my wife was not alone. I did not feel anger in that moment. I felt a calm focus, the kind that comes when you have turned confusion into observation and observation into knowledge. I opened the spreadsheet I had created and entered the restaurant charges, cross-referencing them with timestamps of her text messages and the flight itinerary that showed the early departure from Miami Airport. Each inconsistency between what she had said and what the evidence showed was added as a note in the spreadsheet, building a timeline that began to tell a story I did not yet have to narrate aloud. As I worked, I remembered the quiet evenings before this, when Natalie would linger on her phone, sometimes laughing softly at something I could not see, sometimes pausing mid-conversation as if she were listening to someone else. Those small moments, insignificant at the time, now became part of the pattern I could trace. Around mid-morning, I took a break and walked to the garage, checking my tools and the workbench as if their order could reassure me that at least one thing in my life remained certain. The sun was bright outside, bouncing off the wet pavement from last night's rain, but I barely noticed it. My focus was internal, mapping locations, times, and interactions with a precision I had applied to every engineering project I had ever led. By noon, I had collected enough information to start forming the narrative in my mind. The lunch receipt from a Cuban restaurant, the Uber receipt to a marina, the hotel room upgrade confirmation, all told the same story. Her solo vacation was not so solo. I did not call, I did not text, I did not engage. I let the evidence accumulate like a dam forming in a riverbed. Every piece placed in the folder reinforced the inevitability of knowing, of clarity, of control. Brian Keller called again around 1:30, asking if I was okay. I told him I was. Not excited, not upset, just methodical. He did not ask for details. He did not need to. His silence confirmed that the path I was taking was correct. Gather, organize, verify, and wait. By late afternoon, I had built a full picture of the previous 24 hours of Natalie's trip, a timeline so detailed that it could not be argued with. Every charge, every movement, every timestamp was logged, and the folder on my desktop now seemed like a physical manifestation of the order I had imposed on what had been chaos. I placed the printed hotel confirmation, the dining receipts, and the screenshots into a manila envelope labeled Miami Trip, keeping it in a drawer near my laptop. Sitting back, I took another sip of coffee and looked out the window at the quiet street. No sound from the neighborhood, no cars passing, nothing but ordinary life continuing outside while I methodically cataloged the extraordinary hidden patterns of my own household. The calm in the kitchen was deceptive. It was not peace. It was preparation. I was ready to follow the evidence wherever it led, to observe without interference, to act with certainty when the time came. The folder before me was more than documents. It was control, clarity, and the first step in transforming what I had feared into what I would understand completely. By early evening, the folder had become heavier than paper had any right to feel. I had built the timeline from the airport curb to the hotel lobby, from the first palm tree photo to the restaurant charge that told me there had been a second chair at the table. Still, one name kept sitting in the center of it all like a stone at the bottom of a glass. Tyler Brooks. I told myself not to look for him. Then I looked anyway. Not through anything private, not through anything hidden, just the public trail people leave when they believe they are too clever to be caught by ordinary things. His profile was not hard to find. Same bright smile, same polished haircut, same expensive confidence I remembered from the Christmas party years ago. The first posts were harmless. Golf course, airport lounge, a photo of his watch beside a boarding pass with the destination cropped out just enough to pretend it was private. Then I saw it. A story saved under the caption, Reset Weekend. A glass balcony, ocean behind it, 2 plates on a small table. And in the reflection of the sliding glass door, faint but clear enough, was Natalie wearing the red sundress I had bought her for our anniversary in May. I did not move for almost a full minute. The house around me disappeared. The kitchen, the clock, the coffee mug, the papers, all of it faded behind that small reflection. She had worn my gift into another man's weekend. That was not proof a court would build a life around, but it was enough for a husband's heart to stop arguing with itself. I took a screenshot, saved it, printed it, and placed it in the folder behind the hotel confirmation. My hands were still steady. That bothered me. A man expects betrayal to feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like ice forming one careful layer at a time. I called Brian again, not because I needed advice, but because silence was starting to become too large. He answered on the second ring. I told him I had found Tyler's post. I told him about the reflection. Brian exhaled slowly and said, Mark, this is where most men make the mistake. They send the message. They demand the truth. They give the other side time to clean up. I looked at the photo on the table, Natalie's red dress caught in glass, Tyler's little caption sitting above it like a joke. Brian continued, call a lawyer before you call your wife. So I did. Rachel Donovan's office was downtown, and I knew her name because Brian had used her during his divorce. Her assistant answered with the kind of calm voice that makes you sit up straighter. I explained enough without explaining everything. Marriage, shared accounts, possible affair, wife out of state, evidence collected. I expected pity. I got process. Rachel called me back 20 minutes later. Her voice was direct, professional, and mercifully free of drama. She told me not to confront Natalie while emotions were high. She told me to preserve every receipt, every message, every travel record, and every public post exactly as I found it. She told me not to access anything I was not legally allowed to access, not to threaten anyone, not to make social media posts, and not to move money recklessly. Then she asked one question that made the kitchen feel colder. Is the house premarital or marital property? I looked toward the hallway, toward the photographs on the wall, toward the staircase Natalie had decorated with garland every Christmas. Premarital, I said. I bought it 2 years before we married. Rachel paused just long enough for the information to matter. Then we start with documentation, she said. Not revenge. Not punishment. Documentation. When the call ended, I wrote her name on the sticky note under Brian's words. Build the case. Under that, I wrote one more sentence. Do not give her time to rewrite the story. At 9:41 that night, another charge appeared. Hotel bar. $96. I saved it without flinching. At 10:14, Tyler posted again. A close-up of two coffee cups on a balcony rail, Miami lights behind them. No faces, no names, just enough for people to envy him and not enough for them to question him. But in the corner of the frame, on the glass table, was Natalie's white linen bag. I knew that bag. I had carried it to the airport curb myself. That was the moment the story stopped being suspicion. It became architecture. A room made of receipts, reflections, timestamps, and silence. I closed the laptop, placed the newest printout into the folder, and sat in the dark for a long time. I did not hate her yet. Hate is loud. What I felt was quieter and more permanent. The part of me that had been waiting for an innocent explanation finally stood up, took its coat, and left. The following day, I continued to build the narrative silently, layering one fact upon another, letting each discovery guide the next step. I reviewed the receipts again, noticing patterns in the timestamps that suggested repeated visits to the same locations, not random choices. Each image Tyler had posted, each message Natalie had sent, became part of a growing map I could follow without leaving my home. I did not try to contact either of them. I did not call the hotel or the restaurants. I knew better than to disturb the fragile equilibrium I had begun to construct. My focus was on understanding, on verifying every small detail before it could be questioned. By mid-morning, I had labeled each folder meticulously: flights, accommodations, dining, social media posts, timestamps, and screenshots. The precision of this organization brought a strange calm. It was not satisfaction. It was preparation. I could see the bigger picture forming, how the various threads of her trip connected, and how each subtle choice she had made contributed to a pattern I could now trace. Around 11, I received an alert that one of the social media posts had been deleted. A fleeting instinct wanted to panic, but I did not. Instead, I immediately opened the folder, verified the screenshot I had taken the previous night, and confirmed that nothing could be altered that I had already documented. The evidence was mine now, secure and irrefutable. I sipped coffee, glancing out the window at the quiet street, appreciating the ordinary life continuing outside while the extraordinary unfolded in meticulous detail on my laptop screen. By early afternoon, I began to see the cumulative effect of the evidence, how it formed a timeline that left no room for misinterpretation. Every location, every charge, every post aligned perfectly with the window of time Natalie claimed she was alone. None of it matched. The hotel suite upgrade, the paired dining charges, the reflections in photographs, all corroborated what the receipts had suggested. I did not need to imagine. I did not need to guess. The clarity was in the accumulation. Around 3 in the afternoon, I called Brian again, not for advice, but for confirmation that I was seeing what he expected. He listened, silent for a moment, then said, "Mark, you are ready. Ready to act when necessary. Ready to respond with precision." I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. Not for confrontation, but for the next step in a plan that would no longer be about suspicion but about certainty. By 5, I had printed every key document, organized them in chronological order, and placed them in the manila envelope labeled Miami Trip. I left it on the counter, visible but not in a place of panic, a silent statement that control had shifted. The house remained quiet. I did not need to watch the clock or wait for a call. I had everything I needed to proceed calmly and strategically. Later that evening, I glanced at the envelope one last time, then shut my laptop. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I did not notice. The sense of order, the knowledge that the evidence was complete, brought a level of calm that anger never could. The extraordinary was no longer hidden. It had been captured, structured, and preserved. I knew precisely what had occurred, what had been concealed, and what the next steps would reveal. It was not triumph or vengeance at that moment. It was clarity, and clarity was everything. At 6:30 the next morning, Rachel Donovan called while I was standing in the laundry room folding towels I could not remember washing. Her voice was calm, clear, and practical, the kind of voice that did not waste sympathy when structure would help more. She had reviewed the basic timeline I had sent through her secure client portal. The airport drop-off, the blocked messages, the credit card charges, the hotel upgrade, Tyler's public posts, the deleted story, the reflected red dress, and the white linen bag on the balcony table. She did not sound surprised. That may have been the saddest part. She said, "Mark, you have enough to protect yourself emotionally, but now we protect you legally." I leaned against the dryer and stared at the little green light blinking on the machine, steady and ordinary, like the world had not changed at all. Rachel explained the first steps. Separate documentation from emotion. Keep originals. Do not alter images. Do not contact Tyler. Do not post anything. Do not drain accounts. Do not change locks without proper notice. Do not give Natalie a reason to turn the story into fear, confusion, or harassment. Then she said the sentence that settled over me like cold weather. The first person to lose control usually loses the narrative. I wrote it down, not because I needed to remember it, but because writing kept my hands busy. By 8 o'clock, I was at my local bank branch in a navy jacket and jeans, sitting across from a manager named Mr. Collins, who had helped us refinance the house years earlier. He asked how he could assist me, and I said I needed to reduce exposure on a joint credit card and open a separate checking account for my paycheck going forward. I did not mention Miami. I did not mention Natalie. I spoke in terms of budgeting, legal advice, and household restructuring. Adult words. Clean words. Words that did not bleed on the desk. The bank could not magically untangle a marriage in one appointment, but it could stop new damage. The joint card was not canceled entirely, because Rachel had warned me not to look reckless, but the limit was reduced and alerts were tightened. My direct deposit was redirected to an account only I controlled. I transferred only what Rachel said was appropriate, leaving enough for normal household obligations. It was not dramatic. No slam door. No grand speech. Just signatures, forms, and a blue pen scratching across paper, while somewhere in Miami, my wife was still living inside a lie she thought I could not see. At 11:15, my phone buzzed. The joint card had declined at the hotel. I stared at the alert in the bank parking lot with my seat belt still unfastened. The screen showed the amount, the merchant, and one beautiful word, declined. I did not smile. Smiling would have made it feel cheap. I just sat there, breathing through the first real shift in power. 7 minutes later, Natalie unblocked me. The first call came in before I had even started the truck. Her name filled the screen, bright and familiar, like nothing had happened. I let it ring. The second call came 30 seconds later. Then a text. "Mark, call me now." Then another. "This is embarrassing. My card is not working." I looked at the words and remembered how many of my messages had disappeared into silence the night before. Message not delivered. User not found. Location unavailable. A man learns a lot about dignity when the person who ignored his fears suddenly needs his convenience. I waited until the third call went to voicemail. Then I opened a blank message and typed one sentence. "You should ask Tyler to cover it." I did not send it. That was the old Mark, the one who wanted a clean little wound in return for the one he had been given. I deleted it, locked the phone, and called Rachel instead. She answered on the second ring. I told her Natalie was calling because the card declined. Rachel said, "Good. Do not debate. Send only what we discussed." So I did. I pulled into a quiet corner of the parking lot, opened my messages, and typed carefully. "Natalie, I am aware you are not alone in Miami. I have documentation. I will not discuss this by phone. Future communication should remain in writing unless it concerns an emergency. When you return to Ohio, you will receive formal paperwork." I read it 3 times before sending. No insult. No accusation beyond what I could support. No begging. No anger she could screenshot and twist. Just truth with shoes on. The moment I pressed send, the typing bubble appeared, vanished, appeared again. Then my phone rang. Then rang again. I turned it face down on the passenger seat, started the truck, and drove away from the bank under a pale Ohio sky, feeling something inside me unlock that no hotel key in Miami could ever open. When Natalie returned to Ohio, she found the house quiet, the photographs rearranged, and the manila envelope labeled Miami trip waiting on the kitchen counter. There was no confrontation, no yelling, no desperate explanations. The evidence I had gathered stood silently, immovable, and irrefutable. She looked at the papers and then at me, and I said nothing. Rachel Donovan had advised that no words could be more effective than truth documented. The afternoon sun filled the kitchen with pale light, reflecting off the table and onto the folder, making the words on receipts and screenshots gleam like a quiet spotlight. Natalie understood without me having to explain. I did not gloat. I did not lecture. I simply lived in the control I had created through patience, precision, and calm observation. By evening, the sense of balance had shifted entirely. The house, which had felt like a stage for confusion, now felt like a room organized for clarity, with every detail in its place. Tyler Brooks' posts and receipts could no longer hide reality, and Natalie could no longer craft a narrative without me knowing each step. I went to the living room and sat on the couch, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of all the days spent observing, documenting, and waiting settle. It was not satisfaction or triumph. It was peace and understanding. The extraordinary, the betrayal, the silence, all had been transformed into clarity and preparation for the future. As I looked toward the window, seeing the Ohio sunset spread golden light across the street, I realized how critical it had been to act with composure and method, to build the story not with emotion but with evidence, and to allow the natural course of truth to unfold without interference. I wondered how many moments of uncertainty I had turned into lessons on patience, discipline, and strategy, realizing that sometimes the most powerful action is inaction until the right plan is in place. The sun dipped lower, and the house felt lighter, no longer weighed down by unanswered questions or speculation. I poured myself another cup of coffee and leaned back, reflecting on the way calm focus and careful observation had restored order. At that moment, I considered the journey I had taken, from doubt and concern to clarity and control, and I could not help but think about others who might find themselves in similar situations. What would you have done in my place? How would you handle the knowledge of truth when it comes gradually, piece by piece, in small, undeniable proofs? I invite you to reflect on that as you watch this story unfold. If you find yourself intrigued by the precision, patience, and strategy in uncovering reality, consider subscribing to our channel for more stories where observation and method reveal truths hidden in plain sight, and where calm, controlled actions lead to outcomes that are both satisfying and thought-provoking.